What we're going to look at in this video is editing effects. So be aware we have two types of effects in Premiere Elements. We have fixed effects, which are applied straight to your clips as soon as you import them, and standard effects, which we can add as we're editing a clip. So we'll look at the fixed effects in this video. We can achieve, or we can see them either through clicking on Edit and then Edit Effects, so we get the Edit workspace and then Edit Effects applied on the selected clip, and here we see a list of 5 different fixed effects. We have Image Control, Motion, Opacity, Volume and Balance. We'll be looking at Volume and Balance in a separate video to do with sound. We can also, if I go back to the Organize workspace, we can get to the properties of a clip through the Properties button just above the Scene Line view, or we can say Window and Properties, and this takes us back to the same place. So the first of the options, the first of the fixed effects, is Image Control, and here we can affect the brightness of a clip, so increasing the number or dragging the slider right increases the brightness, dragging it left decreases the brightness. We can affect contrast, again increasing the number, dragging right increase contrast, dragging left or decreasing the number removes or decreases contrast. Hue allows us to change the color of a clip. By default it is 0.0. We don't have a slider for this one, but we can make use of the scrubby slider. So recall, position the mouse cursor over the numbers. When we get the pointing finger with a left and right arrow underneath that finger, press and hold the left mouse button and we can drag left and we can drag right to make changes to the color of a clip. Saturation, which is the last of the image controls, deals with the saturation of colors. So as we drag right we can increase that saturation, making colours more pure. As we drag left we can desaturate or remove colour from a clip. Do be aware, whilst we've got sliders that we can drag, or scrubby sliders, and these work for all of the numbers, you can also just click on top of a number and type in whatever value you require. So that's image control. We also have motion, so we can change the position of the clip within the video. So the first number is the horizontal position. You can drag it left and right. The second number is the vertical position, and again dragging it left and right pushes it up or pushes it down. We can also scale the clip, so scaling is pretty much zooming in. If you drag the slider right or increase the number, it zooms in, drag it left, it zooms out. By default you will have uniform scale checked, and this means that as you zoom in or out it maintains the clip aspect ratio. If I turn that off by unchecking the box, we then have scale height and scale width. So you can stretch out or compress the height of the image, and you can stretch or compress the width of the image. We can also rotate a clip left or right through 90 degrees by just clicking on the little icon. We can also change the anchor point, again dragging it left or right. Seems only to change the position of the clip again, but as we apply different changes it will alter the way in which that change is applied. Changes the positioning that that change refers to, shall we say. The last option in motion is anti-flicker filter, which is more to do with still images in a video or movie rather than the actual video clips themselves. If we put a still image into the film, then if the video is interlaced, that's how the image is being displayed, horizontal lines, straight horizontal lines in an image may appear to flicker because there's only the one line of information. So if you find that still images are flickering, we can increase the anti-flicker filter. And the last one that we're looking at in this video is opacity. And opacity is basically the transparency of the clip, so you can make it slightly transparent or more transparent by dragging the slider left. We can also click on these fade in and fade out buttons, which are very similar to the transitions that we've seen. It's basically the dip to black transition, but instead of being between clips, it fades in a clip in and out. Okay? So what we've seen here are changes that are applied to the entire clip. If I increase the brightness a little bit, and then drag the current time marker through the if I find the right button, through the clip, you can see that the entire clip has been brightened. It might be that you only want to apply these changes to a specific point in a clip, or if you're rotating an image you might want it to spin through 360 degrees, and to do this we have to make use of keyframe markers. To see the keyframes, we click on this little button where it says Show Keyframes. It's to the top right of the Fixed Effects, and that shows us another little mini timeline. We have a slider, a time slider, and the little red line that we can drag through the mini timeline, and that small space contains the whole of the clip that we're working with. You can see that we've got two squares on the left hand side and two on the right hand side already applied to this mini timeline, and they are the keyframes for the fade in and fade out. And so these small little, and they're little diamonds now, indicate the time in which it takes for that fading in and again for that fading out to be applied. So those little diamonds are our keyframes, the frames in which something occurs. These ones that we've got are defaults that are used for the fade in and fade out, like I say, but if we wanted to control how an image brightness was affected in specific parts of the image, the first thing that we'd need to do is toggle animation on, and this allows us to insert keyframes at the very start. What you do have to remember is that with keyframes, if you've only got one keyframe, then it will apply that change to the whole clip. We need a start point and an end point for our frames. So if I toggle animation on, you can see this gives us the little add or remove keyframe buttons and the next keyframe and previous keyframe buttons. They don't work at the minute because we've only dropped one keyframe. So I'm going to drag the slider across, and I want it to get brighter here. So if I drop a new keyframe and then drag the slider across a little bit, drop another new keyframe and increase the brightness, and you'll see that between these 2 points the brightness suddenly increases. If I want the brightness to maintain that level until this point, I can drop another keyframe marker, and if I reduced the brightness at this point, what we'd see is across that line the brightness changes. So if you want it to maintain for a specific period of time, we keep the brightness up to that high point, and then let it drop by putting in another keyframe and dragging it down. And what you can see here is one of the problems with keyframes. You might be able to notice that the clip seems to get darker and then suddenly gets brighter again, and then gets darker again. And so what you have to be aware of, as you just turn the volume off, as you drop keyframes, we can drop it with the add or remove keyframe. You also drop a keyframe by moving a slider or changing numbers. So it is something to be wary of to begin with, but as you make use of it, it does become more, as you use it, you become more aware of what you're doing. So I want to get rid of this keyframe here, so if I click on remove keyframe, it gets rid of it. And then to make sure that we're going to the next keyframe instead of dropping another one, if I click on the go to next keyframe, and again I can get rid of this one, and then the next keyframe is that pure bright one, and then the following keyframe is the brightness out. I don't want it quite that low. So like I say, with keyframes you need to have the start keyframe and then the change, and then if you want the change to maintain, to be held for a period of time, you need to have a second keyframe that marks the point in which that change is dissipated. Okay, so that's making a keyframe change with the brightness. It might be slightly easier if I go with motion. If we want to have a 360-degree turn for our keyframes, or for our clip rather, again I drop some keyframes, and a quarter of the way through I'm going to rotate left by 90 degrees, and then again about half of the way through I'm going to rotate left again, and then around about 2/3 of the way I'm going to rotate left once more, and then we drop the final keyframe. We're back into the normal position. So as I mouse back over these changes, you can see that the effect is applied across those times, so we can control exactly what frames a change occurs, and we can control exactly when it occurs. Okay, so that's the idea of keyframes. It gives you complete control over the clip, and by using the fixed effects we can change brightness, contrast, hue and saturation, scaling, rotation and opacity. So, something to be aware of: in order to hide the keyframes, we just click on this button again, that top stopwatch. Do be aware that the toggle animation switch is a toggle switch, so if I click on this one I get a warning dialog box telling me that this action will delete selected keyframes or existing keyframes. Do you want to continue? So what you have to be aware of is that if you toggle keyframes or toggle animation off after you've dropped some keyframes, it will undo all of your work. And if you find that it's gone horribly wrong, then that is a good way of undoing everything and starting again, because it will delete all of those keyframes and allow you to start again from scratch. So that's making use of the fixed effects and dropping keyframes to apply that change. The more observant of you may have noticed that if I just toggle this back on again, we do have a got rid of that one, so if I drag that across, for some strange reason it's not being displayed in the monitor panel anymore. We do have a done button, so it can be that after you've finished you can click on done and it will apply your changes. A second way to finish, if I apply a different change now, and the reason it's not showing is because the opacity for the whole clip is shown to 0. If we change the opacity, or change the hue rather, at this point, you can either click done, or again you can just click on a different clip and it will apply those changes, and then for that new clip give you the fixed effects window and the ability to add or change keyframes. So that's making changes within your video, and if I just play through that, you can see that I've applied the keyframes to the sections that I have selected with the keyframes.